Welcome to the debate. Today we're diving into some truly provocative ideas, specifically those presented by Jay Alfred in his article, How to Identify a Dark Matter Life Form. The central question we're really wrestling with here is this. Does our rapidly evolving understanding of dark matter, particularly its potential to exist as a complex plasma, does that genuinely provide a credible framework for the existence and maybe more importantly, the identification of life forms fundamentally unlike ordinary matter life? My perspective is that the scientific groundwork laid by recent discoveries and theories strongly points towards a logical extension of life into the dark matter realm, making their eventual identification seem like a foreseeable scientific pursuit, maybe even an exciting inevitability.
And I come at this from a somewhat different angle. While I absolutely acknowledge the groundbreaking advancements in understanding dark matter, I mean, they're significant, I find myself urging a more cautious approach. The leap from theoretical physical properties of dark matter to the concrete existence and specific identification of complex dark matter biology, that's a huge leap, even considering the fascinating work of Alfred and others. I'm just not convinced we're quite ready to make that jump.
Well, when we look at the current scientific picture, framed by researchers like Lisa Randall, Sean Carroll, and of course Jay Alfred himself, the concept of dark matter life doesn't just seem plausible, it feels like a logical progression. We've certainly moved light years beyond seeing dark matter as simply inert passive particles. The prevailing view now suggests a really rich dark sector, which is essentially a parallel universe of particles interacting primarily with themselves through their own unique dark forces. Imagine, dark charges, dark electromagnetism, maybe even dark light, photons that only interact with dark matter particles. This isn't just invisible matter, it's almost like a mirror realm operating alongside ours.
Right.
Propose that a significant chunk of dark matter exists in a plasma state, specifically a complex dark plasma. And this complex aspect is, it's key. It's not just a soup of charged particles, it refers to a plasma that exhibits self-organization, forms intricate structures, and can, potentially store energy and information.
Okay.
This is profoundly significant because, as Alfred highlights, experiments with ordinary matter plasma have already generated these plasma cells that display what he calls inorganic living matter attributes. These aren't just static arrangements. They self-confine, they transform energy, they rhythmically exchange matter with their environment, and critically, they even seem to replicate by division. Vn Cvitovic and his colleagues have taken this even further, demonstrating plasma's ability to self-organize into stable, interacting helical structures. Structures strikingly resembling DNA, complete with memory marks for self-duplication and rudimentary metabolic activities.
Resembling DNA.
Exhibit the fundamental attributes we associate with the earliest forms of life: self-organization, metabolism like energy exchange, and self-replication, all within an open thermodynamic system. It sort of blurs the line between complex physics and rudimentary biology. So, if ordinary plasma can exhibit such features, and dark matter is predominantly dark plasma, which we know is 5 to 6 times more abundant than ordinary matter, it presents a pretty compelling case. For me, the logical extension is that dark plasma life forms aren't just possible, but, due to their sheer abundance, they could potentially be the most common life forms in the universe. Alfred's article then moves from this theoretical groundwork to provide a detailed set of identifiable features for these dark plasma life forms. Things like spherical or ovoid cell bodies with concentric shells and sheaths, filaments, helical currents, vortices, plasmoids, surface features like coronas, spicules. This move from, let's say, theoretical possibility to concrete identification is, in my view, a crucial and logical step forward in astrobiology.
Okay, I understand the allure of that line of reasoning, I really do. But I find it problematic because it seems to conflate fascinating physical phenomena with let's say, the rigorous definition of biological life. While the theoretical evolution of our understanding of dark matter, from a simple inert particle to this complex dark sector, with its own forces and the possibility of dark plasma, is undoubtedly intellectually stimulating. And yeah, it's well supported by physicists like Randall, Carroll, and Alfred. The leap to dark matter life forms and their specific identification warrants, I think, significant caution. The source material itself, in a quote attributed to Lisa Randall, actually refers to this as an extravagant leap of possibility.
Extravagant, perhaps, but not impossible.
Well, extravagant. And while Sean Carroll optimistically states dark biology is not far behind, this still remains fundamentally a highly speculative projection. The analogies drawn between ordinary plasma phenomena and biological processes, for instance, you mentioned plasma sheets being analogous to a biological cell membrane or helical plasma structures behaving like DNA. They are just that, analogies. They resemble biological structures, sure, but their underlying mechanisms and complexity are fundamentally different. Grégoire Nicolas, a renowned physical chemist, has voiced considerable skepticism regarding the emergence of complex biomolecules, like actual DNA, at the extreme temperatures you find in plasma environments, even in ordinary matter. And this is a formidable challenge that would almost certainly extend to dark plasma. The identifying features presented in Alfred's article, they're derived from observations of laboratory and space plasma. And then, as the article itself states, they're superimposed on a human body template for illustrative purposes.
For illustration, yes. To make the concept relatable.
Right, but this framework, while certainly imaginative, primarily describes physical plasma characteristics, not proven biological functions like consciousness, adaptation, or true self-sustaining reproduction and evolution in a genuinely biological sense. The article confirms that ordinary and dark matter could physically overlap without ever strongly interacting. This suggests that any dark life would exist in a fundamentally separate realm, making direct interaction or the detection of biological processes, rather than just physical structures, incredibly challenging, even if the physical forms could be inferred somehow. We just have to be exceptionally careful not to prematurely conflate self-organizing physical systems with true biological life, however primitive it might seem.
I'm not entirely convinced by the extent of that caution, though, because it seems to perhaps underestimate the profound implications of what's already been observed in plasma. Lasniano's plasma cells, they don't merely exist. They actively replicate by division and engage in information exchange. Sitovich's plasma DNA doesn't just bear a superficial resemblance to DNA, it apparently exhibits memory marks for self-duplication and engages in metabolic activities within a thermodynamically open system. To dismiss these as merely physical phenomena feels like missing the critical point. These are, by almost any emergent definition, the rudimentary attributes of life. They embody what Alfred Bald calls inorganic living matter. If ordinary plasma, under specific conditions, can demonstrate these core characteristics, self-organization, energy processing, replication, then why would dark plasma, which is hypothesized to be the dominant state of dark matter, be fundamentally different in its capacity for, let's say, nascent life? The logical leap here, for me, isn't just about possibility, it's more about statistical likelihood. If the fundamental building blocks in rudimentary biological processes exist in a medium that is 5 to 6 times more prevalent, well, the statistical probability just skyrockets, doesn't it? This isn't just a quirky if, it feels more like a compelling then for this perspective.
Okay, while I grasp the point that these are rudimentary attributes, my concern remains that we're projecting biological functions onto what are essentially highly complex but ultimately physical plasma dynamics. Nicolas's skepticism, which you acknowledged, points directly to the immense gap between a plasma self-organizing into a helical structure and that structure actually serving as a stable template for complex biomolecules or carrying genetic information in a truly biological sense where, specific sequences encode for functional proteins. Metabolic activities in a plasma context, as you noted, it refers to energy and matter flux. A perfectly valid physical process, but it's not really equivalent to the highly specific, intricately regulated enzyme-driven metabolic pathways we understand in carbon-based life. To call it inorganic living matter is a significant definitional leap, I think. It's one that many in the traditional biological sciences would likely find, premature. we're still observing physical systems that mimic some attributes of life, not necessarily what we would generally accept as life itself. What this fundamentally forces us to grapple with is not just whether dark matter can host life, but how narrowly or how broadly we define life itself. Is form and basic function enough, or does true life require a specific chemical dance and a proven evolutionary pathway from those initial living structures?
But these primitive attributes, the enclosure, the energy acquisition, the reproduction, these are precisely what define a starting point for biological evolution. We aren't discussing highly complex sentient beings here, obviously, but the foundational properties that allow for life to begin. Alfred's article then moves from these foundational principles to the concrete identification of features. He meticulously describes spherical or ovoid cell bodies with concentric shells, filaments, helical currents, vortexes where filaments cross, plasmoids. These aren't just abstract ideas, they are extrapolations from observed plasma phenomena that, for me, could act as concrete identifiers for dark matter life forms.
For instance, those vortexes where filaments cross. Okay, they be points of intense physical interaction, sure, but potentially analogous to specialized structures, or maybe even primitive organs within a dark plasma entity, enabling more complex internal functions than just simple diffusion. This gives us something tangible to look for, right? A kind of blueprint for detection?
I understand the appeal of having a blueprint. I do. And the imagination involved in Alfred's extrapolations is, undeniable. However, these expected features of a dark matter life form are, as you yourself said, characteristics of plasma bodies, whether observed in a lab or in space. They are then instructively superimposed on a human body template for illustrative purposes. This highlights the very problem for me. They are predictable physical characteristics of plasma, not necessarily indicators of biological function. How, for instance, does a concentric shell acquire energy in a way that fuels a biological process, rather than simply mediating charge gradients? How does a helical current reproduce beyond a simple plasma division that might be induced by external forces? These features, like coronas and spicules, they're observable surface phenomena of stars, which are undeniably plasma bodies. But we don't typically classify stars as living organisms, despite their incredibly complex, self-organizing plasma dynamics. We need a much clearer conceptual bridge, I think, that explains how these physical structures perform genuine autonomous biological functions, like energy acquisition beyond simple thermal exchange, reproduction beyond simple division, or evolution that goes beyond structural changes dictated purely by physical forces. Without that bridge, we risk applying biological terms far too loosely to purely physical processes. So the core tension remains. Is our current biological paradigm too restrictive, or are we applying it too loosely in this context?
I appreciate you emphasizing that crucial distinction, but the articles we're drawing from, they posit that these plasma cells do acquire and transform energy. They exhibit rhythmic exchange of matter, and they undergo continual internal transformations. Furthermore, Alfred suggests these entities could transmit and receive information wirelessly through dark electromagnetic fields, effectively acting as plasma antennae. This sounds like far more than just static physical structure. It represents dynamic interaction, functional capacity, maybe even information processing. Given this evolving understanding, maybe Randall's description of dark life as an extravagant leap and Carroll's dark biology is not far behind shouldn't be viewed as a contradiction, but as, two sides of a challenging but ultimately logical progression. The very concept of a dark sector, with its own forces, charge, and the prevalence of dark matter as complex plasma, provides the fundamental scientific groundwork for this possibility. This makes dark astrobiology not just purely speculative, but an increasingly probable and critical field of inquiry. It's a field that maybe demands we push our definitional boundaries for life.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that the scientific community as a whole is ready to embrace dark astrobiology as a mainstream field based on the current evidence. The extravagant leap phrase itself, coming from Lisa Randall, underscores the immense conceptual distance we're talking about. Understanding dark matter's physical state as potentially plasma is one thing. Inferring the existence of complex, evolving life with all its biological hallmarks is quite another. It remains largely a theoretical construct, an imaginative projection, rather than a domain supported by direct empirical data or a fully articulated, testable conceptual bridge between complex plasma physics and the origin of biological complexity. We are still, as a scientific community, grappling with the sheer physics of dark matter itself, its particle nature, its interactions, its distribution. The leap to a dark biology feels profoundly premature without more direct evidence or clearer testable hypothesis for its emergence and evolution, one that can be differentiated from purely physical phenomena. We need to be able to falsify these claims, right? And that's incredibly difficult right now. It boils down to a fundamental question. How do we balance necessary scientific imagination with empirical rigor, especially in these new frontiers?
But the sheer abundance of dark matter, that 5 to 6 times more than ordinary matter, that can't just be ignored in this discussion. If the fundamental building blocks, the plasma state, and the observed rudimentary lifelike behaviors in ordinary plasma are indeed scalable to the dark sector, then the statistical probability of dark plasma life just seems enormous. The very lack of strong interaction, as Randall points out, meaning dark and ordinary matter could even physically overlap without ever strongly interacting, actually presents a unique opportunity, doesn't it? Creating separate worlds for evolution, where dark life could flourish, maybe undisturbed by our matter. J. Alfred then suggests that information transfer via dark electromagnetic fields offers a potential path for us to detect them, however weakly. This isn't necessarily an absence of interaction, it might just be a different kind of interaction. We already inferred dark matter through gravitational effects, which is a fundamentally weak interaction. So why couldn't we eventually infer or detect biological functions through equally weak but distinct dark electromagnetic signals? Perhaps looking for patterns that hint at information processing or metabolic activity, this offers a specific, albeit challenging, avenue for detection.
Okay, while the potential for distinct, weak interactions is intellectually intriguing, the formidable practical challenges remain. You're right that dark and ordinary matter could physically overlap without strong interaction. But this very weak interaction is precisely what makes detection of biological functions so incredibly difficult. Our current instruments are meticulously designed to detect ordinary matter interactions. Even if dark electromagnetic fields are a mechanism for information transfer, as Alfred proposes, how would we distinguish a complex biological process from a purely physical plasma phenomenon that just happens to generate similar electromagnetic signatures? Gravitational effects give us clues about mass distribution, yes, but they tell us nothing about life. Dark photons remain theoretical, highly elusive. To truly discern anything genuinely biological like programmed reproduction, adaptation, or even basic metabolism from a complex but ultimately non-living physical system would require an entirely new paradigm for observation and analysis, a paradigm we are likely decades, if not centuries, away from developing. The fundamental disconnect in strong interaction remains a formidable barrier, pushing this, for now, far into the realm of speculation rather than practical detection.
I see the immense practical challenges you're outlining, absolutely, and I agree that our current technological limitations are significant. However, Alfred doesn't shy away from these. He suggests we might look for very specific signatures, perhaps unusual fluctuations in gravitational fields that can't be easily explained by ordinary matter, or even subtle, transient dark electromagnetic emissions that exhibit some kind of rhythmic or patterned behavior, indicative maybe of information processing within these dark plasma structures. Imagine a future where we build specialized dark matter detectors designed not just for mass, but for these subtle dark EM patterns. It's a long shot, certainly, maybe a moonshot, but a directed one. Based on the hypothesized physics, it compels us to think creatively about our instruments, at least.
That's certainly an interesting thought experiment for future detector design. But let's be realistic for a moment. Even if we could hypothetically detect such rhythmic or patterned dark electromagnetic emissions, how would we definitively interpret them as biological information processing as opposed to complex but non-living plasma dynamics? I mean, a highly active solar flare, for example, exhibits complex patterned electromagnetic emissions, yet we don't classify it as a biological entity. The interpretive ambiguity would be immense. We need a conceptual framework and observational evidence for dark matter chemistry and dark matter biology before we could confidently attribute such signals to life, rather than merely advanced dark matter physics. The jump from complex physical patterns to proof of life is just not a trivial one, especially when our only lens is likely to be a weak indirect interaction. What this really highlights, I think, is that the true limitations here are both technological and conceptual, pushing the very edge of what we understand about life and, frankly, how to find it.
Well, we have certainly delved into J. Alfred's thought-provoking article, How to Identify a Dark Matter Life Form, exploring the profound implications of considering dark matter as a complex plasma. I have articulated, I hope, a compelling argument for the logical extension from sophisticated theories of the dark sector and observed plasma phenomena to the potential for dark matter life forms, even proposing specific characteristics for their identification, aligning with the idea that the scientific groundwork really does support this pursuit.
And I, in turn, have offered, I think, a vital counterpoint, urging caution regarding the analogies between physical plasma behavior and complex biological processes, highlighting the speculative nature of such a leap without further direct evidence. The challenge, as we've explored, lies in distinguishing complex physical self-organization from genuine biological life, and of course the immense difficulties in detecting such entities given their fundamentally weak interaction with ordinary matter. Indeed, whether dark plasma structures truly represent inorganic living matter or merely complex physical phenomena mimicking life remains, I think, a profound question. It certainly invites further exploration within the source material and far beyond. The future of understanding life in the universe may indeed require us to extend our definitions, but hopefully with rigorous skepticism and robust empirical grounding to avoid mistaking fascinating physics for genuine biology.